Tonight, the death of an American hero, Neil Armstrong, the first person to set foot on the moon, is dead at the age of 82.
It's one small step for man.
Also tonight, Florida issues a state of emergency as Tropical Storm Isaac eyes the Sunshine State. Manuel Bojorquez is in the Keys as the storm approaches. It's the economy. President Obama and Mitt Romney sharpen their attacks on the eve of the Republican convention. Jan Crawford has the latest. And a winning guitarist captures a world championship with no strings attached.
This is the CBS Evening News.
Good evening, I'm Anthony Mason. He was a combat naval aviator, space pioneer, and the first man to set foot on the moon. Today, Neil Armstrong died from complications following heart bypass surgery. He was 82 years old. In a statement, his family called him a reluctant American hero. Armstrong long shunned the spotlight, even though he played a leading role in one of the greatest moments in American history.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
It's a brilliant surface in that sunlight. It's an interesting place to be. I recommend it.
When Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon on July 20th, 1969, he fulfilled the goal that had been set by President John Kennedy just 8 years earlier. It was a long, long way from his birthplace, near tiny Wapakoneta, Ohio, in 1930. Armstrong's fascination with airplanes began with his first flight at age 6, and that fascination never abandoned him. He left Purdue University in 1950 when the Korean War broke out and flew 78 combat missions as a naval aviator. After the war, he became a test pilot and flew the hottest aircraft around, including the sleek X-15 rocket plane. He took the powerful craft to 207,000 feet, almost 38 miles, and the edge of space. He was in the first group of civilian astronauts and made his initial flight in 1966 aboard Gemini 8. The mission almost ended in disaster when a thruster on his craft stuck open, sending the ship whirling through space. With his trademark coolness, Armstrong used a backup system, stopped the 1 revolution per second spin, and made an emergency landing in the Pacific. The preparation for the moon landing included learning how to fly the ungainly lunar module, which would descend vertically to the moon's surface. Armstrong had another brush with death when the training vehicle rolled to its side, and he was forced to eject just 200 feet from the ground.
After that happened, when it was all over, you went back to your office and sat down to do paperwork.
That's true. I did. There was work to be done.
Wait a minute. You were just almost killed.
Well, but I wasn't.
And then finally, after years of training, the moment arrived. On July 16, 1969, a giant Saturn V rocket lumbered off the pad at the Kennedy Space Center, carrying the 38-year-old Armstrong and crewmates Buzz Aldrin and Mike Collins. Armstrong later said that the landing itself was the high point of the mission for him. He coaxed the lunar module past craters and boulders as Aldrin called out speed and altitude.
4 forward, drift into the right a little. Drifting Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Yes, indeed. They've got the flag up now.
After almost a day there, the astronauts lifted off, rejoined Collins in the command module, and began the long journey home. Despite the initial fanfare, after the historic flight of Apollo 11, Armstrong remained a humble and intensely private person. He left NASA and taught engineering at the University of Cincinnati, and later served on the boards of several aerospace firms. One of his rare public appearances was at a gathering with Aldrin and other Apollo astronauts to mark the 30th anniversary of their moon landing.
In my own view, the important achievement of Apollo was a demonstration that humanity is not forever chained to this planet, and our visions go rather further than that, and our opportunities are unlimited.
Among the hard-charging, super-achieving Apollo astronauts, there was bound to be some envy about whom NASA would select to lead the historic mission. But Mike Collins flatly stated what so often was said about his reticent and self-effacing commander. I can't offhand think of a better choice to be the first man on the moon. Today, President Obama called Armstrong among the greatest of American heroes, not just of his time, but of all time. Tropical storm Isaac is powering up as it eyes Florida. Right now, the storm is swirling over Cuba with winds of 60 miles an hour. Today, Florida's governor declared an emergency, and Republicans set to meet in Tampa are considering schedule changes to their nominating convention. Manuel Bojorquez is in Key West tonight. Manuel, good evening.
Good evening, Anthony. Here in Key West, there has not been a mandatory evacuation notice, but with Tropical Storm Isaac bearing down and a hurricane warning in effect, visitors are now being advised to leave.
Name and how to spell it. So we get
Mark Williams has survived many hurricanes in his 25 years in the Florida Keys, but Isaac will be his first in an emergency shelter.
It could go one way or the other, or it could stay over the Gulf too long and become a bigger storm, and then it's like, well, here we go, another few days at the shelter. It's like
You'll stay here as long as it takes to write it out.
Yes.
Shelters like this one are opening on the islands for those who can't leave, while at the Key West airport, several airlines have added extra flights out for those who can.
Yesterday, we really got concerned, so we actually came here and changed the flight.
Isaac is expected to pass over the Keys and move up the northern part of the state. Governor Rick Scott has already declared a state of emergency.
We now have the risk of a hurricane in the Keys and also in the Panhandle. My job is to focus on all 19 million Floridians, the residents, plus all the visitors of our state.
In Tampa, where preparations are underway for the upcoming Republican National Convention, the city is handing out sandbags to combat the risk of potential flooding. The port also plans to close due to Isaac's threat, but officials at the convention center say they are ready for the delegates and the storm.
The governor's assured us that they've got stuff.
Isaac's center made landfall just before noon on the far eastern portion of Cuba, taking out trees, downing power lines, and causing flooding in the city of Baracoa. At least 3 people were reported dead in Haiti, and others still living in tent cities after the 2010 earthquake had their makeshift homes destroyed by high winds. This woman in Port-au-Prince says most of the tents have been destroyed. We have no place to go, and we don't know what to do.
This is the 9th named storm of the Atlantic hurricane season, with NOAA predicting a potential total of 17. The Keys could start seeing the effects of Isaac as early as dawn, with tropical storm force winds of at least 39 miles per hour. Anthony?
Manuel Bojorquez, thanks. We're joined now by David Bernard of CBS station WFOR, who is tracking the storm. David, good evening.
Good evening, Anthony.
How strong is the storm now, David, and how likely is it to become a hurricane?
Well, right now, the latest information from the Hurricane Center is showing this is a strong tropical storm with 60-mile-per-hour winds, and it's racing to the northwest at 21 miles per hour. The thinking is this is going to approach the Keys on Sunday afternoon, and once it gets past the Keys on Sunday night and during the day Monday, this could become a hurricane in the eastern Gulf just to the west of the Tampa area, and maybe a strong hurricane, potentially a Category 2, as it makes a second landfall in the Panhandle on Tuesday, and then a big rainmaker in the southeast on Wednesday and Thursday. So right now, it looks like lots of heavy rain, strong gusty winds, but will they be significant damaging winds in the Tampa area? If the storm tracks closer to the coast, maybe, but right now it looks like the very worst of it might stay just to their west.
David Bernard. Thanks, David. Turning to campaign 2012, the Republican ticket of Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan joined forces in Ohio today, wrapping up the pre-convention campaign. Jan Crawford was there. Jan?
Well, good evening, Anthony. We were at Romney's rally this morning outside of Columbus. He and his running mate were squarely on message, hitting the president hard for his jobs record and saying he was all talk and no action.
Do you want 4 more years of Barack Obama? No! Either do I.
Campaigning with Paul Ryan in Ohio, Romney took aim at the president on the issue voters say they care about most, the economy.
He doesn't understand what it is that makes America's economy so powerful, so dynamic, and so unique in the world.
And with polls showing a gender gap, Romney also made an economic appeal to women.
Just a word to the women entrepreneurs out there. If we become president and vice president, we want to speak to you. We want to help you.
But in an interview today with the Associated Press, President Obama called Romney's views extreme and said, "We aren't where we need to be. Everybody agrees with that. But Governor Romney's policies would make things worse for middle-class families." The Romney campaign immediately shot back. Too many middle-class families are going to sleep each night worried about the future. This may be the best President Obama can do, but it's not the best America can do. In Ohio this morning, Romney stayed away from the birth certificate joke that caused a dust-up yesterday in his home state of Michigan, when he told a crowd of thousands,
"No one's ever asked to see my birth certificate. They know that this is the place that we were born and raised."
Romney, when asked by CBS's Scott Pelley, said he was not questioning where the president was born.
Why did you say that?
Oh, we're in Michigan, and Ann and I both born in Detroit. And, of course, a little humor always goes a long way. So it was great to be home, to be in a place where Ann and I had grown up, and the crowd loved it and got a good laugh.
Last night, the Obama campaign tweeted, "Song of the Day, Born in the USA," and provided a link to the Bruce Springsteen song. Now, I don't think we're going to be hearing any more of these birth certificate jokes from Romney. Some Republican strategists told me they thought that was a distraction from his main issue, which is the economy. And Anthony, as we saw today, he was right back on that message, talking about jobs.
Jan Crawford, thanks, Jan. New York City police said today that all 9 bystanders caught in the crossfire of Friday's shooting near the Empire State Building were hit by police bullets. Surveillance video shows a man pointing a gun at 2 officers. They opened fire, getting off 16 rounds. The suspect died in the hail of bullets, which erupted after he killed a former co-worker. 6 of the 9 wounded bystanders have been released from the hospital. In Syria today, anti-government activists said the bodies of at least 79 people were found massacred in a town close to Damascus. They say many of the dead appear to have been shot, quote, execution style. And coming up on tonight's CBS Evening News, job cuts and changing times at New Orleans' award-winning newspaper. Venezuela's biggest oil refinery erupted in flames this morning after a massive explosion. At least 26 people were killed and 80 others injured in the blast. Officials say a gas leak is to blame. The dust has yet to settle on Apple's patent lawsuit victory over rival Samsung. Friday, a California jury ordered the world's largest maker of smartphones to pay Apple more than $1 billion for essentially stealing its iPhone and iPad technology. John Blackstone has more.
Much of the huge market for mobile devices could feel the shockwaves from Apple's billion-dollar win over Samsung in the California courtroom. CNET writer Josh Lowenson covered the month-long trial.
In the world of tech, this is a really big deal because it comes down to this he said, she said argument of who created something.
The jury agreed that Apple created software for on-screen actions like pinching and zooming, and design features like the iPhone's rounded corners and the arrangement of icons on the screen. Samsung is not the only maker of lookalikes.
For a lot of other cell phone makers who have maybe similar-looking devices, they might have to rethink how they design phones and tablets.
The verdict sharpens Apple's competition with Google, maker of the Android software that runs on many smartphones and tablets, including those made by Samsung. Android phones now outsell iPhones by 3 to 1. Apple said the verdict sends a loud and clear message that stealing isn't right. Samsung called the verdict a loss for the American consumer, which could bring potentially higher prices. The company says it will appeal, and for now at least, the affected products will remain on the shelves. And this isn't the only legal clash between Apple and Samsung. A judge in South Korea yesterday reached a split decision in a similar patent case. The two technology giants are battling in courtrooms around the world, as well as in stores. John Blackstone, CBS News, San Francisco.
This just in, the Republican Party has just announced its Tampa convention will convene Monday and immediately recess in the wake of Isaac. The convention plans to reconvene Tuesday. Next, an award-winning newspaper trying to reinvent itself. New information tonight on the West Nile virus. The number of states reporting deaths from the mosquito-borne disease doubled this week to 16. Nationwide, more than 50 deaths have been reported, including 2 more in the hard-hit Dallas area, bringing the toll in Texas to 23. 7 years ago next week, Katrina ravaged New Orleans. Among the heroic efforts was that by the staff of the Times Picayune newspaper. But as Mark Strassman reports, the storied paper will soon be cutting back its print edition.
For nearly 30 years, John McCusker has captured daily life in New Orleans for the Times Picayune. The joys of Mardi Gras, the horrors of violent crime.
Being there and witnessing history, as I've been lucky to do as a photojournalist, nothing is like that.
When Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans and the levees broke, the paper became a mirror and a megaphone for a city's desperation.
The newspaper proved a beacon to people. It was a rallying place where our story was told.
And a lifeline at that moment.
Absolutely.
McCusker's Katrina photos helped the Times Picayune win a Pulitzer, print journalism's top prize. But he says his colleagues meant more to him than the award.
We were people that went through horrible things together, and it made us closer. And I guess that's what made it all the harder to know that that's being taken away from us now.
Taken away on September 30th, when the paper's management will cut its staff in half. 84 journalists, including John McCusker, will lose their jobs. The paper will focus on its online coverage. It will print only 3 days a week.
My own parents are among those passionate readers who say, we can't fathom not having a daily newspaper in this town.
Editor Jim Amos says the 175-year-old paper's bottom line must adjust to a digital world.
I think all of us in this industry find ourselves in the grips of a really fundamental, earth-shaking revolution.
But a daily digital newspaper needs readers with computers. And by one estimate, more than 1/3 of people in this city, 36%, aren't connected to the internet.
Ronald Lewis is a lifelong resident of the city's poor Lower Ninth Ward. He doesn't know how to go online.
The newspaper, for me especially, during and after Hurricane Katrina, was very vital. Because it became my true source of information.
McCusker says it's not just a job he's losing, but his identity.
Since 1983, I've introduced myself as John McCusker with the Times Picayune. And I'm not going to be doing that anymore. And I'm wondering who I am, what I'm going to be.
In true New Orleans fashion, he recently held a jazz funeral at his home for the paper and its laid-off journalists. This fall, he'll pursue a new career, giving jazz tours in his native city. Mark Strassman, CBS News, New Orleans.
And ahead, a championship out of thin air. Finally tonight, you may have tried this at home, but the contest in Finland was strictly for professionals. Last night, the world's best brought out their imaginary instruments for the 17th annual Air Guitar World Championships.
It was very close. He loved
the main square in Oulu, Finland was packed. The Air Guitar contest brought together national champions from the Netherlands, Germany, and Japan, Estonia, and France. Judges who used the same 6-point scoring system used in figure skating were rating mimesmanship, stage presence, and what they call airness, or the art of the performance.
I think my heart decides who is the best one. It's that simple and difficult at the same time.
A dark horse, American Justin Nordic Thunder Howard, made it into the contest through the qualifying round.
Going early in a competition is it's tough because the judges, they're going to be conservative with their scores until they see someone that really just pops. So my plan is to come out and be that one that's like...
And when Howard let loose with an inspired air interpretation of Lose My Soul by the Flaming Sideburns, the judges were clearly moved.
5.9 and a 5.9!
Chicago's Justin Nordic Thunder Howard was crowned Air Guitar Champion of the World.
I feel amazing. I feel loved. I feel like crying and laughing and hugging.
My strength, the winner said, is that I have absolutely no shame. I think I'll have to do some more practicing. And that's the CBS Evening News. I'm Anthony Mason in New York. For all of us here at CBS News, thanks for watching. Good night.
On television, online, on the go, and now free on iPad. CBS News.